So this is a story about Vito Genovese, Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Frank Costello, and Lucky Luciano. This is a story about how these guys, or should I say these guys, go from immigrants or children of new Americans. They go from low-level street thugs into building what Stephen David, one of the guys who's going to be out here tonight, into making what they call an illegal Fortune 500 company. These guys are, you're going to have to say, organized, what we call today organized crime. So let's hit the first clip. So, I've seen the first 2 episodes, it's great. Let's bring out our panel. Yay. So, let me introduce you. On the far end, it's Stephen David. He's executive producer, Making the Mob New York, airing Monday, June 15th at 10 p.m. That's following the TV premiere of the 25th anniversary edition of Goodfellas, which I think made a world premiere just recently at the Tribeca Film Festival.
That's right.
Special treat. Second person, you probably recognize, Chazz Palminteri. Just to state the obvious, it's my pleasure to say Bronx Tale, Usual Suspects, Analyze This, Bullets Over Broadway, which for, of course, he got an Oscar nomination. The next guy is Meyer Lansky II. Clapper will make you clap. The last guy over here, Selwyn Raab, is a journalist, the author of the best-selling 5 Families, mob lawyer, and the work that inspired Kojak, if I'm not mistaken. And so, Stephen, when you take on a project like this, so much has been written and produced on the Mafia and on these figures, on Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky. How do you say something new? How did it come together? I mean, what are people going to know now that they didn't know when they didn't start watching this 8-part series?
Well, I've seen a lot of mob movies. I think we've all seen a lot of mob movies. There are truths in those movies, but the whole story isn't true. I've seen individual movies about these people, but very quickly when we got into the research of this, we realized that this was actually 5 friends who, as you said, got together and started an illegal Fortune 500 company. So it's really the tale of 5 friends, and I've never seen the entire story put together with the 5 friends.
Yeah, right backstage we call them the Beatles of organized crime.
Exactly. So I think that that's new, and you're going to see the whole story, which I didn't know, and it's a fascinating story that as you watch, you'll say, oh, that was in The Godfather, that was in Goodfellas, but the way the whole thing came together over that time period is completely new. I didn't know it, I've never seen it all put together, and I think people are going to be fascinated by it.
One thing I saw in an interview that you did with AMC is the fact that Frank Costello, who elements of Frank Costello became Vito Corleone, he saw a shrink much like Tony Soprano.
That's right, and that was one of the first facts I heard that I was just amazed by. It was in the 50s. He was the acting mob boss. He couldn't handle the stress, and so he started seeing a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist actually told him to be charitable to deal with his stress. So he was holding an event for the Salvation Army. And the psychiatrist happened to be there, and some people asked who he was. And he told them he was Frank Costello's psychiatrist. And then very quickly he was out of that job.
That was his undoing.
Yeah.
And really, why is this on AMC? Why does this project taking place as it is now? Why is it a Mob Monday? Why for the next 8 weeks are we going to have these iconic mob movies followed by your series, Making a Mob?
Well, I love the shows on AMC. I think there's great drama on there. They play a lot of mob movies on there. I think they have a history of playing mob movies. So that's why I was able to sell this to them, which was good. But I think it's a perfect fit. It fits in with the drama. We were actually talking earlier today about they do shows about characters who want to live their own lives, do their own things their own way. And that certainly is the mob.
And one thing you see, I mean, I think it's true, I think you guys might agree about this, is that the mob legend has one foot in ripped from the headlines history and another foot in sort of entertainment and how it's portrayed in novels, in movies, in TV shows. And this series, we see not just guys like Chazz and other actors who have played iconic parts in films, but guys like Rudolph Giuliani and state Supreme Court judges who have taken on real-life mobsters and children of mobsters like Meyer. So it's really one foot in each world. So how does the docudrama style suit what you're saying?
Well, I think the idea of it is that you're getting drama, archive, talking heads that are experts, and a lot of visual effects. And you're supposed to feel, the whole thing is supposed to feel like this is almost found footage, so that it is still a documentary, but it plays seamlessly. And you're in the characters like you would be in a scripted show. You care about the people, but you're constantly reminded this is true.
Right.
This is the actual history, which is amazing.
Right. And in the audience tonight, just first, are some of the actors who are in the show, Rich Graff and Ian Bell. Rich Graff plays Lucky Luciano, and Ian Bell plays Meyer Lansky, are here. Chazz is interviewed in the show. And Chazz, really, have people ever mistaken you for a real mobster? You grew up in the Bronx. You've got the look. I really think that, like, if I say too much right now, that I might disappear.
I hear that all the time, but for the record, I've never been arrested. I've never been in the mafia. I went to school. I went to college. I grew up with them. But if anybody saw the movie A Bronx Tale, that was my life. Growing up, my first 17, 18 years, that was me. My real name is Calogero. I was sitting on a stoop, and this guy whacked the guy right in front of me, like from here to the end of the stage. And he turned and looked at me, and my father dragged me upstairs, exactly like in the movie. And what happened, as a writer, what I did was I added that, I went down and I did the lineup. What really happened was the cop came upstairs, and when I went upstairs, I wouldn't go down. My father wouldn't let me go down. He said he didn't see it. And the cop said, "Did you see anything?" I said, "I didn't see nothing." So that's what really happened. But as a writer, I put the line up there, and me and Sonny kind of looked at each other, and I said, no. I made it more dramatic. But what happened was the next day, when I went outside and I was playing, he came by and he looked at me and he gave me one of these, you know. And I looked at him and I smiled, and he looked at me like, I know that you know that I know that you know.
Yeah. You know a bit about the milieu.
Yeah, I grew up with it.
And let's roll a little clip to show, like, just the sort of the expert commentary that you provide. That's actually not the clip I expected right now. That happens, but we'll get back to that, because really everyone who's seen the first episode knows that Chazz's sort of definition of what it takes to make it in the mob is an unforgettable moment. But Meyer, what point in your family did you decide that, like, we have to stop downplaying this Meyer Lansky mob boss part and start playing it up, because it's good, it's sort of good fun, and it's part of pop culture?
Well, that's just it. It came into pop culture recently, in the last 5 years especially.
Yeah.
With TV shows, a lot more books, the internet. I never downplayed it as the grandson. I always embraced it.
Okay.
I liked it. It wasn't anything I was ever embarrassed
You never had any problems on the playground because
No,
grandpa's
I never did, actually. I had advantages on the playground, so that was always a big thing. Back in the 70s when I went to junior high school, all the kids were getting initiated.
You grew up in Miami, right?
I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. My dad was in the military, so we were stationed out there. And born and raised in Tacoma.
But you've lived in Miami and
Lived in Miami.
Tahoe like Michael and
Tahoe.
Godfather too.
Right, yes. But no, the advantages were surprising because I didn't know a lot about things back
You
in
didn't
12, 13. And the 9th grade kid said, leave him alone, we'll initiate these guys. My buddies are looking at me and I'm thinking, I don't know why at this point, but I got left alone and, invited to parties, and here's my 7th grade friends are getting beat up and their money's getting taken for lunch, and So.
What was your father's assessment of Lee Strasberg's portrayal of Hyman Roth, who is largely considered a riff on Meyer Lansky, the mob boss?
He actually called Lee, got his wife on the phone shortly after the movie was released, and said, you did a great job. And he talked to him. He said, well, thank you. And they talked for a while. And Grandpa said, you could have made me a little more empathetic. I'm a grandfather myself. And we joked back and forth with him for a while. But he liked it. He liked the portrayal. He thought it was great. He liked the movie.
And if he didn't, Lee Strasberg probably wouldn't have made it
there you go.
to Going in Style and some other great productions.
Yes. But
Did you have a sense of like what your father was accused of doing? And
no, did I?
Yes.
Not till I was about 12 years old. Walter Cronkite, he was being let go from Israel to come back to the United States for tax evasion charges. And I remember at 12 seeing this map in 1970, I think it was, and Grandpa is trying to get off in Argentina. They offered him $1 million and they put it right back on the plane. So I'm asking my parents, what's going on? I thought Grandpa was a kitchen director. He said, well, what's he doing in Israel? I had no idea, but my parents at that time didn't really want to talk about it to me too much. And, but I started getting
and the tens of millions of dollars the IRS has hired away, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
I don't know a thing about it.
Chazz, you believe him? That's a good acting.
Absolutely, I believe it.
Well,
Oh, man.
well, let's roll the next clip because not the Chazz clip, but it's there, and we're going to get it. It's Selwyn. Have you ever felt writing about the mafia, being a mafia journalist, that your life was in danger?
No. Very simply, anyone who knows anything about reporting is almost any story you do can lead to trouble. I once had a Boy Scout leader who threatened me because of a story I wrote about his daughter and had been a runaway. So the point is, journalists are always, in some form, endangered.
Yeah, I personally was sued by Bozo the Clown.
All right, well, there's an example. You never know.
It's a true story.
There have been nasty things said about me. And I've had, when I've covered things, especially down in the Fulton Fish Market, but it was usually the low-level people. There was always this unwritten law. As long as you showed respect and didn't write anything that was wrong or sensational, you'd be respected by the mob leaders. So that's changed in the last 15 or 20 years when you've had a new element, a whole new generation of more violent people and less control from the top. But getting back to basics, almost any story you write as a reporter can lead to difficulties. So I don't think I was in any more danger than somebody covering politics. Mm-hmm. You never know who is insulted or feels endangered by a story. So
you'd say the mob people, the people who were killing people, who were controlling prostitution and heroin, they were no more dangerous than the people in Congress.
Well, all I can say
which is I think a valid
all
point.
I can say is I never lost any sleep. And I knew a lot of these people, and they knew me. At the same time, until I really, late stages of my career in journalism, I stayed away from television and didn't want my face to be seen. So I just had a byline. And some people would make a joke because I wrote many of my stories for the New York Times that the mobsters didn't read the Times. And the biggest problem...
What, they read the Post? They read
the
Daily
Post or
News?
the news. And the biggest problems, if you wrote about the mob with the Times, was the lawyers. And I'd be threatened often by lawyers who would claim I was in the employ of the FBI or I had written fallacious stories. So I was more concerned about the lawyers giving me a hard time or threatening me than any real mobster.
I thought it was extraordinary listening to surveillance tapes, the tap phones. I think the Smoking Gun published a lot of them, of mobsters talking. And they were so influenced at the time by The Sopranos and by the sort of mob movies that they'll be showing on Mob Monday on AMC. It's hard to tell at a certain point whether movies were more influential to the mobs.
Yeah. There's no question that part of the responsibility for the success of the mob in America has been the glorification by Hollywood and by TV, especially The Godfathers.
Yeah.
And The Godfathers, the music in The Godfathers became the national anthem.
The Godfathers.
Yeah, and you had this famous remark made by Sammy the Bull Gravano, who said when he was a young recruit, when he saw The Godfathers, he didn't realize how important the Mafia was, and he was so proud to become a member.
Until he saw it.
Especially a movie like The Godfathers, where you have the good mobsters like Don Vito, the white hat guys, who presumably told lie were opposed to narcotics, defeating the narcotics types. So that was one of the most egregious not a blunder, but it's a question that it was good entertainment but terrible history.
So Chazz, maybe like you do owe an apology for portraying all these mob characters because you actually glorified the mob.
Well, you know, I hear that a lot from Italian Americans sometimes. I speak to a lot of Italian Americans about that. I'm a member of NIAF and a bunch of those things, and I always say that that I always preach, and that's why I actually came tonight, because it's important that I want to say my feelings about the Italian Americans, that the Italian American community is really held together by the working people, and that's why I wrote A Bronx Tale. My father, Lorenzo, was a bus driver, so it was important for me to talk about that. It's the people who get up for a living and work hard, the cop, the fireman, the bus driver, these are the people that make the Italian American community, not the mafia. The mafia is glorified in a way, yes.
And 2/5 of the people that we mentioned here,
Yes.
Bugsy Siegel,
Yeah.
Meyer Lansky, Jews, short Jews, we have a part of this.
Yeah.
And,
Look,
and what made this
look,
generation...
I mean, his grandson is right next to me, and all due respect to your grandfather and anybody else. But I'm sorry, they were thugs, and they made their bones on the sweat of working people. Now, were they better than the thugs we have today? Yes, because these are cowboys, what we have today, and they don't care about any tradition, any honor. The old timers, yes, they did. They didn't want to get involved in drugs, but I'm not going to glorify them. They were still thugs. Like my dad said, it's harder to get up in the morning and work for a living than it is. You know, it doesn't take much strength to pull the trigger, son. Get up in the morning and work for a living. Then we'll see who the real tough guy is. So I want to put it into perspective. I grew up with these guys, and they were friends of mine, but I didn't admire them. They all have horrible lives. Divorces, horrible children. Horrible.
Horrible. Yeah.
No,
The grandchildren.
no.
They're my friend.
No, in my neighborhood, those wise guys, those kids grew up to be gangsters, and they're all in jail. So I never saw a success. Maybe, see, Meyer's not a child. He's not the son. He's the grandfather. He's the grandson. His father was in the military. That's different. That's different. And his father, for whatever reason, obviously Meyer did the right thing, you know, and he went into the military. But I'm telling you, in my neighborhood in the Bronx, Brooklyn, all those places, that I knew all these wise guys, horrible lives. And I don't mean to glorify them, and I don't mean to come down hard on them, but it's important for me. I played Judge Giovanni Falcone, and he was the hero of Sicily who put the mafia away. I went to Sicily, and I played him in a movie in Sicily. And it was I loved it. It was a great thing because I wanted to play somebody who put these guys away. It's important to me.
Are there mob characters that you haven't enacted, historical figures that you'd like to let chance to
Mob characters? You know, I don't know. It would have to be somebody. Any mob character that I like to do has to be a three-dimensional person. Look, I played Cheech in Bullets Over Broadway, but he was a brilliant playwright. I played Sonny in A Bronx Tale, but he was a guy who really wanted the kid to do the right thing. It has to be a character that's three-dimensional. I won't play just a goon who's just a thug and a goon. I won't do that. I won't. I get offered that all the time, and I won't do it. It has to be somebody who has more three-dimensional, has some sort of depth. That's important to me.
Stephen, why do we love gangsters? Why do we love the mafia?
Well, after hearing that, I'm not sure, but
No, there's a reason why.
I think I have my theory is that they do, they are going to go to jail or be killed. There's a lot of, that, but I think secretly we would like to live like them.
Yes.
There's a freedom.
Yeah.
There's a freedom in being able to do what you want, not have to go to a regular job. There's excitement. There's different things happening every day. You have a lot of money. So you're living it up. So I feel like secretly, it's somewhat American to want to just have freedom and live free and get to do what you want and hopefully not get killed.
Excuse me, Stephen's right. I mean, they're like Robin Hood. I admire them so much, and I said, oh my God, this is incredible. Just by being the wise guy's boy, as I was, I had his ears, I was treated like royalty. And I can imagine how he's treated. And I understand that. And you know what? It's a natural instinct to feel that way. To walk into a bar and eat when I'm 18 years old, 19 years old, to drink, and they go, no check. No, don't give him no check, no, don't do this. No, he's calm. And you feel like, hey, how would you feel if you were best friends with the President of the United States? That's what it's like. But the reality is, it's not a good thing.
Meyer Lansky, you have one of the most infamous names in organized crime. When you walk into a Home Depot to buy
I get
garbage bags,
Wait, let me tell you.
and they say on your American Express card, Meyer Lansky.
Oh boy.
What the hell happens?
Sometimes they recognize the name.
What?
Sometimes they recognize the name, actually. No, in the last 5 years, it's ever since Boardwalk Empire and Anatol Yosef playing his part. Anatol Yosef and the Boardwalk Empire came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Grandpa has actually become bigger and more popular in pop culture than he ever.
Would you say bigger than U.S. Steel?
No, not that big. But he's getting up there. But no, I get. The funny thing is, I live out west, so I drive to Vegas and back, and I'll get odd comments from people that I think would know that name when I go to give my ID, and then they won't, and I'll go to a gas station, the guy will know it. He said, "Oh, I read those books all the time," A lot of people that have friends and relatives that are in prison, they tell me all the time, my cousin reads your books, your grandfather, they know all about him. I'm surprised because I didn't think he was that popular.
This goes back to what you were saying to me in the beginning, why is this different? I didn't know it either. I didn't realize that these were the founding fathers of the modern mafia.
Right.
Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel.
Yeah, they're like Robin Hood. They dress nice. And the thing that makes a mafia guy so appealing to people is their paradoxes. They're 1 minute they're picking up the kids. Let's all eat together. Family's so important. Let's sit down and eat. This is And then the next minute, that night, they go out and kill somebody. So it's wherever culture is like that, they have this love and respect and this and that, and then they do bad things. So it's like a paradox, and to us, it's like, wow, man, holy shit, that's incredible.
Selwyn, is Chazz right?
Well, the American public has always had enchantment with criminals. It goes back to Jesse James,
Right.
still glorified, and Dillinger. I don't want to disabuse Meyer of the idea that his father or grandfather was really one of the founders of organized crime in America, the mafia. For the most part, your grandfather really was a vassal, and he really had no control. For the main reason, one of the reasons is the Italian mafia, which was really set up by Lucky Luciano, who's the architect. And he adapted the rules. He and Joe Bonanno were really the two creators. And what made the American mafia survive, while other ethnic groups diminished, including the Irish. Oni Madden was a big shot in New York during Prohibition. And also the Meyer Lansky and Buck Siegel gang, was essentially that Luciano adopted the rules from which he really inherited from Maranzano, that there was a structure. Now, when the Italian mafia has a table of organization, people are replaceable. Now, you had major Jewish gangs like Dutch Schultz, but once Dutch Schultz was taken out, the gang disappeared. Lansky had no real organization. He was working. That's why he couldn't save Bugsy Siegel. I mean, the order came down, you had to be an Italian, and in many of the 5 organized crime mafia gangs in New York, some of them, like the Bonanno, insisted you be a Sicilian.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that you had to have a reputation. So the point was, the other organized crime gangs, and there were German organized crime gangs in New York too, they all disappeared mainly because when the leader was taken out, like Lepke, they vanished. And even the strength of the Italian organized crime families were that they really had this institutional theory, and it was hard to get in. You couldn't just volunteer. So that's what made them, that Luciano, the 2 biggest reasons the mafia had a golden era in America were 2 people, Luciano and J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover refused to recognize that there was the existence of the mafia families in America for a variety of reasons. But the point was, without Luciano, without J. Edgar Hoover, we would never have had the mafia.
Stephen, I think it raises a big point in that research in this is tough because there's so many conflicting accounts of who was running what. The organized crime, by its very nature, is cryptic, and everything is done in the shadows. So it's tough to decide exactly what the true narrative is. How did you make some of those choices?
Well, we used a lot of source material, a lot of books. There's a lot of expert interviews. So we were searching through all of it to put this story together, and we are telling what Selwyn's saying is actually the story we're telling, and you because we basically go from 1905 to 1960. A lot of this history has been told. I probably would have a hard time telling the history or the story of the mafia right now.
And just to go over, by 1905, all these guys are young, either immigrants or the children of new Americans, and they're meeting like Luciano met Meyer Lansky, and they're basically just schoolboys. They're teenagers, or barely teenagers. And they go into this thing. By 1960, they're influencing politics and elections and world politics, what's going on in Italy and the rise of Mussolini. And that's really a tremendous trajectory.
Right, they were, poor immigrants on the street, and they, built an empire, an illegal empire. But like you're saying, you think about how hard it was to go from nothing to a structure that was that big, that had that many members, that made that many billions of dollars. It was organized like a corporation.
Right, and the meeting, the famous scene in The Godfather with the meeting in the bank vault, that's sort of, we see the inspiration of that, and the Lucky Luciano having a meeting with a bunch of mob bosses and establishing a sort of organization and a commission in New York. And it's those sorts of meetings that gave rise to the sort of movies that became so big. Really rather amazing. And I understand that the making of the mob New York might have a sort of Real Housewives thing. Well, if we're successful, we'll see making of the mob Las Vegas,
right.
Making of the mob Miami, making the mob Los.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
Well, you don't want to be egocentric about New York because we're resented by a lot of other cities. But the point was, New York was the fulcrum. It was known as the volcano. And New York did rule to the most, but the commission, when the commission was established by Luciano, essentially what the idea was, it would be a board of directors to solve any there had been mob wars in the 20s and the 30s, and they knew it was bad for business. And what Luciano did was he wanted, again, there would be some governing body to take care of jurisdictional disputes. But one of the things he did immediately to show you how powerful, how important, and how devastating it was, the 5 families in New York were the permanent members, like they were on the
Security Council. Yeah.
And they would choose whoever else from other cities, whether it be Philadelphia, Boston. But nobody had that paramount importance the way New York did. We, unfortunately, led in this infamous and terrible situation. And we're lucky. We're lucky that we didn't become the way Italy did, that the way the Christian Democratic Party was taken over by the Mafia. They tried, but they didn't succeed in America, and we're pretty lucky about that.
Yeah. That's basically like Mobster 101, right? Intelligence and big balls.
Well, I grew up with it. I saw it. You know, the guys that were really were stone cold killers were just crazy and ruthless, and they could never rise to be a boss. And some guys were real smart, but they didn't have big balls. But
Sonny had the balls.
Sonny
not the brains.
Sonny could have been a CEO of a company or something. He was a very smart guy, very well read. He read Machiavelli. He told me he read Machiavelli in The Joint. You know?
I was talking about Sonny Corleone. Who was
No, I'm talking about the Sonny that I know. But his real name wasn't Sonny. But a lot of these guys, he read Machiavelli in jail. You know, it's like Machiavelli. Why would you read that? You know, how could that be? You know, the guys from my neighborhood. It was funny. I have a couple of guys from my neighborhood. One guy, and I won't say who he is because you would know him, but he grew up he was in one of the families, and he grew up, and he had big balls, and he was really a tough guy, and he became a boss. And another guy had big balls, and he was a tough guy, and he got into the Navy, became it was in the submarine duty, and then he was in the CIA, and then he was retired. So it was perfect. Both things, CIA, Mafia, big balls, smart. 2 different elements. Same neighborhood, 2 different things.
Now we're going to take some questions from the audience, and this question is from Meyer. And the question is, didn't your father go to the Naval Academy or another prestigious military academy and change his name? What would your grandfather feel about this public?
If he did change his name?
Yes.
Oh, in theory. He went to West Point.
Did he change his name?
No, he never changed his name.
Yeah.
No.
Selwyn, did you ever meet John Gotti? Tell us about that.
Well, I did meet John Gotti occasionally during the trials that he underwent. I would meet him in the men's room. And it was a very interesting experience because Gotti would walk in with 2 of his goons, and when he went to the wash basin, they would turn the taps on for him, and they would hold linen towels. He was very economical about New York's expenses. He would never use the courthouse paper towels. They had a linen towel for him, and he would he would wipe his hands on that. And I wished him good luck at one of the trials, and he looked at me and he said in a very trenchant way, "Get the fuck out of here." But I also saw him at he liked to dine at certain restaurants on Mulberry Street, and I made it a habit to sit there too and watch. And again, when he came in, he got this regal treatment. So, but to talk to him was very hard. But his son, who went to charm school, was much different. And I could have conversations. And he would always ask me, he said, "You wrote about my father's millions." He said he would like me to help him find it.
All right, we probably could not go through this evening without asking this question to each of you. What do you think the best mob movie is? And I guess I'd include maybe TV shows. Portrayal of the Mafia. Stephen, do you want to be in?
I love Goodfellas.
Yeah.
I'm actually not covering that time period,
Right.
in this show, but I've just seen that movie probably 200 times.
I would have to agree with Stephen on that. I remember Marty saying that the reason why he made Goodfellas was he wanted to show with the mob how bad they really are, you know. And I think Goodfellas probably, I mean, I like my own movie, Bronx Tale, very much because, only because it shows the other side of, it shows an aspect in mob movies that hasn't been really shown, where he just said, you know, Gotti walked in and got the royal treatment. But is it better to be loved or feared, you know? Is Gotti getting respect, or is he just getting feared? My father got respect. You know, when Gotti walked in, was it respect or was it fear? I don't know, something to think about, you know? So, but movie, I love Goodfellas. I think it's just a great movie.
Did you realize when you're doing Analyze This that Frank Costello, one of the legendary gangsters, mob figures, had been to a psychologist? That like.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't want to say nothing. I was the first one, and I hate to toot my own horn, but I wrote a play in 1990 called Fateful, which then turned into a movie, and it was with me, Cher, and Ryan O'Neal, and I was the first one to put a mob guy talking to a psychiatrist. That was 1993.
Take that, David Chase.
No, it's the truth. That was 1993, and it was the movie came out in '94. But I mean, look, David did it great. The Sopranos was a great thing, and Analyze This was great. But for the record, for the record,
Meyer.
Well, I've seen 2 episodes of it, The Making of the Mob, so I've yet to see the rest. June 15th. That's the best one.
But outside of Making of the Mob.
Godfather 2, obviously.
Godfather 2.
Love that, yes.
Is it?
And 1, you know, both.
Is it the portrayal of your
No,
character like
it's
your father?
the time period. I like that 20s time period where, well, in Godfather it's more the 40s, I guess, 50s. I like the older mob movies made back in the older days than I do the modern. So
When you know, there are a lot of people sort of like you, children of famous mob figures, and who I guess celebrate their past. They're not ashamed of it. They don't hide it. They just sort of like they just accept it, and they accept their part in history, and they enjoy it. And
I enjoy it because, you know, my grandfather, like we were talking earlier about, it was friendship when they grew up as kids on the streets. When my grandfather met Lucky Luciano, Ben Siegel, it was friendship. It wasn't ethnic, really, with them at all. My grandfather never cared about traditionally being in the mafia. It was a vessel for him as well. He became the gaming czar. He ran Cuba. He was known for his honesty in his casinos and his, you know, progressive ways that he set up his casinos, basically. I mean, Batista brought him over there later, just straightened things out.
I just like to ask Meyer one quick question. Is that I'm like stunned that Meyer Lansky's son, your father, went to West Point. Is that correct?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, it's the type he was. How did that happen?
I'm just curious. Like, your dad didn't want him to be involved in this stuff, or he said, "You're not going to do this what I do." I mean, I'm just curious. How did that happen?
I don't think it was ever expressed in the family. From what I understand, it's more the Italians kind of embrace that. Nothing, you know. The
Yeah, no,
Jews
it's
never
okay.
don't. The Jews don't.
The Jews are
They want their
smarter,
kids
right?
to be
Okay,
educated.
yeah.
My dad did not
That-
want. There was a lot of people around my grandfather. And
That's
he didn't want to be
my
that
answer
guy.
right there.
Yeah, he wanted his own life, his own 2 feet.
There you go. Okay.
You know,
No,
that was
the
it.
Italians weren't as smart as that.
That's
I know.
no,
No, it's the truth. No,
it
it's
takes brains and balls. You know.
brains and balls.
brains and balls.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I'm just curious how that happened.
Selwyn.
Of course, Making of the Mob is in a status all of its own as an American.
Airing Mondays, AMC.
June 15th, 10 o'clock.
However, if you want to get
You like Goodfellas.
a real understanding of mafia mentality that was imported to America from, there's an Italian movie called Mafioso, Alberto Sordi, which will explain it all to you. And it's really, the Italians have never taken, the Italian movies about the mafia have been very graphic and very factual and very good. And you get a better idea from how they've done their filmmaking. There's no glorification, there's no glamorization, but it gives you a real understanding. See, every once in a while, Turner Classic has Mafiosa. It is a terrific film, Alberto Sordi.
I'd like to ask each of you, what do you think of the mob being sort of commercialized in sort of tourism? You know, go to Umberto's Clam House, see where Crazy Joe Gallo ordered the clams but got the slugs instead. There are like mob tours of New York in many cities. I mean, what do you think of that? What does that say about the legends?
Do you know who's done that more than we have? The Cubans.
Oh, yeah?
If you go to Havana, you go to the old Riviera, they've got photos of Mr. Lansky, everybody else. And many hotels in Cuba glorify and glamorize. It's one of their pictures. There's even in one of the hotels,
They'll probably step it up
the
now that the
Sevilla,
laws have changed.
they even have the Al Capone Suite, and you can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's a Two Bunch Palm. They have the Al Capone Suite. It's a suite that Al Capone used to go there up in Palm Springs. I stayed at the place. It was pretty nice, you know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was all right, but you know, it comes down to this: if somebody can make money on it, they're going to do it. There's the mob museum. There's mob dishes. But as soon as people stop paying for it, they'll stop doing the mob museum. So, but if people can make money on it, especially now with the internet, with YouTube and everything, it's, you know, it's the way people make money on it. So I guess it's okay.
The money and infamy, how is it?
Well, I mean, I think that the mob actually has a big place in American history.
Yeah.
And you look at those years, they're involved in everything: Prohibition, World War II, elections, Hoover. So you're almost watching them Forrest Gump their way through history, right? But they are a part of it, and they influence it, and they're interesting, and there's violence too. But you know, I think that's why people are so fascinated with it, because it actually is part of our history.
Yes, very much so. Yes. I mean, it's
Some of us actually had dinner at Sparks beforehand, and I would have killed Paul Castellano too for his reservation, because it was a great dinner. So many people ask this at this point, like, is the mob dead as we knew it?
It's seriously wounded, but not mortally. They're still around. What people forget about, I'm sure Chazz would know this, the bread and butter for the mafia in New York has always been gambling and loan sharking. And those are two rackets very hard to get rid of. And they always have money coming in that way. So they've been chased, you know, frankly, and it's a good deal. They've been chased out of things like running the garment center, garbage pickups, Fulton Fish Market, a lot of other industries, especially with the Teamsters. They've been knocked out of there. But one of the problems was the FBI and the Organized Crime Task Force, especially in New York, had until 2011, until the attack on New York by the extremists, they had 400 or 500 people working daily. That number, no longer, the Mafia was number 2 and number 3 on the priority list of the FBI and the Justice Department until 9/11. It's now nowhere on the priority list. So you have maybe 20 or 30 FBI agents and New York police officers investigate them. So you've given them a reprise. And they're out there, and they're still making money, and every once in a while you hear about some undercover operation, and they've infiltrated some union, and they're there, and there's still plenty of money to be made. And again, don't forget, Americans like to gamble. We haven't got HBO, we haven't got organized, we haven't got the state gambling anymore on horse racing and everything else. And the mob will give you, gambling and loan sharking are symbiotic. People get into trouble over debts, they go to a loan shark. So they get you on two ends. And there's still plenty of people making money. As an example, only a few years ago, Sonny Franzese, who was 95, was convicted in Long Island, of running a loan sharking and gambling ring, and shaking down nightclubs and shaking down restaurants. So they're out there, and the question is, the FBI is not as vigilant as it was until 9/11.
Well, good.
Oh, go ahead. I just wanted to kind of off the subject a little bit. If you notice something, and you will in the new mob, Making of the Mob coming up, the Jews lasted one generation. This has been an Italian thing for a long time and a tradition, but so you don't. They're already gone and on their own in different things, grandkids and.
But one of the reasons that Luciano did so well was that he was basically an equal opportunity gangster. He would work with Jews, Irish, he would work with anybody.
Right.
And the people before him were the only worked with Sicilians.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's why he did so well.
I mean, the mafia is not like it was. It's more fractured now. It's very fractured. It's not like it was when Luciano and Meyer's grandfather were around. That's when it was tight. And the thing that broke the mafia up was drugs. I mean, they said it. If Corleone, those old timers knew that drugs would break the mafia. What destroyed it? Okay, when everybody was tight, like it was loan sharking, like he said, gambling, prostitution, shaking down things. When you caught one of the guys, he got 2-3 years. That was it. Once drugs got into it, once a guy was facing 30 to 40 years in jail, they want they have a contest who could sing first. Okay, so all this stuff about honor and nobody rats, that's bullshit. They all rat now. And so nobody wants to be in it. Nobody wants to be the boss. Because once you're the boss, you got a target on you. But you're absolutely right. He's right. After 9/11, a lot of things changed. But the mafia is not like it was anymore. It's very fractured. Are they still making money? Absolutely. Still making money, but not like it was. Not like it was, no.
There are gangster movies, obviously, of 20s, 30s, 40s, the 50s. I mean, you guys were talking about how much you admired Goodfellas, which is more contemporary compared to those films. Will people be making gangster films about our times? What might they be like?
We hope so.
We hope so, right?
Yeah, I think if you could tell a story in a very unique way. I mean, the way they told this, the way Stephen and the AMC told this was a very unique way. 5 friends, these 5 guys, the story of how they grew up together, the story how these 5 kids. It's a very unique. I'm interested, and I've seen every mob movie there is. And so I'm interested in saying, wow, I never knew that. I never knew that.
Yeah.
That these kind of kids grew up together and they started a Fortune 500. I think it's extremely interesting. That's different. So I think as long as you can come away at it in a different angle, people always like it.
I'm gonna go with his answer.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Right. You're well known for the Men Who Built America. This might be called The Other Men Who Built America, maybe.
Right. Men Who Stole America.
Or Stole America.
Yeah.
And do you guys think that there are mob stories yet to be told? Other Lufthansa heists, sorts of things?
Coming up in the future or from
Or just
past
sort of
that haven't
like
been discovered?
that are yet to be told, like undiscovered gems that the public want to know?
I mean, when we were making this, we have 8 hours and we could have made 100.
Yeah.
So even within this, there's so many stories that we weren't able to put into it. We would send in rough cuts that would be 20 minutes too long. Mm-hmm. So there are many stories, but as Chazz said, it's finding the angle.
Finding the angle, which makes it different. I like to see a movie how his father went to West Point after his father.
He's going to love to hear that.
I would love to see that. I mean, I can see it now. Meyer Lansky saving his son. This is not for you. To me, that's a movie.
One day he's going to be looking through his father's old uniform and find his grandfather's fortune.
I mean, I think that's a great.
The IRS has been looking for.
You got to give it to the guy. Here's a guy who was one of the heads of the, and his son ends up going to West Point. Come on, that's a movie, man.
That's great.
It's a movie in itself.
The show is Making of the Mob, New York.
Yes.
Airing Mondays, beginning this Monday, 10 p.m. The lead-in is going to be one of the great mafia films. They're going to have Godfather, of course. We're going to have on Monday the 25th anniversary remastering of Goodfellas, and you will see other classics. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you all. Thank each and every one of you. Appreciate your time.